Now before we begin, let's learn something. A person who speaks fast, who tries to put all his bullshit in one sentence that is hard to understand what he says, is because he knows he is lying, bluffing, and changing the facts. So he talks quickly, hoping people around him will not catch up with what he says. Now to do it in a video, you have to be stupid and think your audience are stupid.
Are male and female the only two genders? Then when did we start associating gender with certain roles in society?
When most women did not want to do the jobs that men did.
When I hear the word binary, my mind immediately jumps to gender and 80s movies about computers. And that's because outside of meaning something that has two sides or two parts, binary is often linked to the concept that there are two genders in the world and every person falls squarely into one of these two categories. And since lots of you Origin of Everything fans write in with questions and comments about things related to gender and gender norms, I wanted to spend this week getting down into an abbreviated history of how we got to the idea of binary gender, what the heck some of the differences between gender and sex are, how those two categories became linked, and why we started associating different tasks in society along the gender divide, with certain behaviors being ascribed to masculinity and others to femininity. Okay, so we have a lot to cover and very little time, but the natural place to start here seems to be, what is gender, and how does it differ from sex? So to start things off in something of an order from concrete to abstract, human sex is usually linked to biological and physical traits of the body. These can include reproductive organs.
This is the only way to determine it. If you can produce a sperm, you are a man. If you can produce eggs, you are a woman. There is no one who can produce both, so there is only a man or a woman.
Hormones, chromosomes, with the old wisdom being that XX chromosomes signal females while XY chromosomes are indicative of males, outward appearance of the genitalia, and secondary sex characteristics, which kick in around puberty for humans. These traits include things like growing breasts, getting hairy, or producing all of that lovely oil and grease that makes our pits stink and our T-zones shine bright like a diamond. Although these are the ways that sex is determined or identified, it also involves a fair bit of fluidity. For example, there are people who are intersex, meaning that they share a variety of these traits across the sexual divide.
Can they produce eggs and sperm?
People can have XX chromosomes associated with women, but present in most other ways as male, and vice versa.
It's also called a genetic fault, which means it's like a disease.
It's also possible to have a mixture of these traits that aren't easily quantifiable.
In other words, things you invent
and don't align neatly with male or female designations, although in some of these cases there are parents and healthcare providers who choose an assigned sex for a child born with a mixture of traits at birth.
No one just chooses, you are born a man or a woman.
But while sex is mostly considered biological, gender is its more loosely defined cousin. Gender relates to the performance of roles, identities, and ideas surrounding masculine, feminine, or neutral traits. And more often than not, we link gender to both outward behaviors and internal ideas about ourselves. A good example of performing gender in society would be a statement like, all girls' favorite color is pink. The first assumption is that girl lines up with female sex.
Speak faster, maybe no one will notice. What are you trying to mean by saying, assumption that girl are female? No matter how much you try to bullshit us, girls are female.
And the second is that given the choice, most if not all girls will not only choose pink as their favorite color, but will also be naturally predisposed to liking pink over other colors.
Liar.
But this idea confuses cultural conditioning with a presumed biological determinism. And if you want more on pink for girls and blue for boys, then this is the perfect time to hop on over to our video on gendered clothing for a deeper explanation.
No thanks, one video from you is enough to burn some good brain cells.
So while both sex and gender are not hard and fast across the board, both are more often than not linked together and then described to us using two choices: male sex aligning with masculine gender, and female sex aligning with feminine gender. But while the concept of two sexes and two genders is ingrained in us as the cultural norm, this hasn't always been universally true.
Proofs.
That leads us to our next.
As you can see, she says things but does not bring one proof. She knows that all the robots that these videos are intended for will never ask why she does not bring even one proof of what she says.
Next question. What are the alternatives to the binary gender model? Well, in fact, outside of the West, many cultures and countries have a history that recognizes either gender fluidity or gender categories that exist beyond the binary. Prior to colonization, the Incas worshipped a dual-gendered god, whose attendants, the Qoriwarmi, wore androgynous clothing and represented a third gender space.
And they still sacrificed virgins to the goddess, who were somehow all women.
Among the Sakalavas of Madagascar, boys who were considered feminine in appearance were raised as girls, and believed to have supernatural protection that prevented them from being harmed.
And that's because they are still men in the tribe's eyes, and that's why they're special.
In Hawaii, Kanaka Malawi indigenous societies had the Mahu, who could be aligned with any biological sex, but expressed a gender role that was in between masculine and feminine.
They are still a man or a woman. They have the ability to choose how to dress and how to behave. It's strange that it's like men being able to choose in the United States.
And the Bernicia of Albania are women who have sworn a vow of chastity and dress as men, a tradition that dates back as far as the 1400s, although their numbers have dwindled dramatically in recent years.
Have you heard yourself? They are women. And it's really a wonder why their numbers have dropped.
So the concept of more than two genders has existed and still exists worldwide. But concepts that biological sex and gender could be fluid also existed in parts of Western Europe. Prior to the 18th century and the rise of Enlightenment thinking in Europe, there was a theory that men and women's reproductive organs could belong to a common sex, even though they were assigned to different gendered roles. So there was one sex but two genders.
Yes. The only sex with two gender was a man. That is why the man has X and Y. He was still a man and not some imaginary gender. But since the separation between man and woman, there is no man or woman who have the ability to produce an egg and sperm. So today there are only two gender.
In the 2nd century AD, Greek physician Galen noted, "Turn outward the woman's, turn inward, so to speak, and fold double the man, and you will find the same in both in every respect."
Yes. And he also believed that the earth was flat, and that the earth was the center of the universe. If this is your evidence, you have a problem.
Physicians at that time also believed that women's female hysteria was caused by wandering wombs.
So you admit you gave a dumb proof.
And while this wasn't a universally held belief, the idea that male and female reproductive organs were somehow two sides of the same coin persisted until the Renaissance. And just like class, gender was given a hierarchy and attached to ideas about innate qualities. So someone of high birth was considered inherently better than someone from a lower class. And the same went with gender, which valued masculine traits and behaviors over all else. And the category of gender was also linked with emerging categories such as race and long-held beliefs like class. So white, male or masculine folks of high birth placed themselves at the top of the pyramid and created complex systems that trickled outward from that center point.
Blah blah blah, a nice attempt to put all the points of feminism into this video. You even succeeded in introducing a race into the video. But all this does not belong to the subject.
With existing hypotheses, the descendants of societies that traditionally practice plow agriculture today have less equal gender norms.
What a beauty it is to lie. Most of the women did not dig the land or did that sort of thing, but women did take part in the harvest, and the rest of the activities they could do on the farm. But of course in your little brain, women have never tried and seen that most of them cannot meet the demands of a hard farming. And that's why most of the hard work in the farm was done by men. I want to see you do it. Deeds are worth more than words. Well, she continues to try to insert the race and the feminism. And does not give even one proof. That's their problem. When you think of yourself as something special, you must put things that you believe in even if they are not related. That's why you see today feminists against gay, lesbians against gay, and even feminists against white feminists and so on. Hope you've learned something. Yes or no, you know what to do.